Hey, hi everyone. Welcome to your show, E-Coffee with Experts. This is Ranmay here, your host for today's episode. And today we have Bradley, who is the Executive Vice President at Next Level Catapult with us. Welcome, Bradley.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Since we have been speaking for quite some time now, and I know that you have had a hell of a journey managing multiple ventures across domains, right? So just wanted to understand, as a serial entrepreneur, you have founded, grown, and sold companies successfully, right, across different niches. We would like to understand what are some of the key considerations for entrepreneurs or business leaders when it comes to scaling ventures, and how do you approach challenges to ensure that the growth is sustainable?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I've had several opportunities to found and grow and sell companies. And what I've learned is that first and foremost, when you start a new venture, if your intent is to exit that company at some point in the future, start with a plan, right? Have a long-term vision in mind, what the company will grow to. Put a number down on paper, right? If you want it to be $20 million of yearly revenue, put it on paper. Make sure that in your plan, you have a vision for how big and how unique that company will be. So that long-term vision, I think, is really important. And then create a comprehensive business plan that will get you there. To have a vision in mind for 5 or 10 years in the future is one thing. You need to put a plan on paper, have something written down so that how you're going to navigate there. Now, granted, that plan will change millions of times before you're done, but having a plan on paper will ensure that you have a path forward, that you have a plan in mind, and that you're moving towards the right goal that you've already committed to. So that plan's like important. And then you've got to make sure you're building a team around you that's going to help you bring that plan to life. I
Right.
always felt the team, surrounding yourself with the right people, especially those first few hires, is just critically important because once you have a plan and once you have those first few founding team members in place, you can start moving towards your goal. And having a team that understands your vision, that will work as hard, if not harder than you will to get there is really important in getting to your goal in the time that you have allotted for it. If you spend the first year or 2 years trying to get the team, you've wasted that time. So those first few hires are really critically important, I think, for getting a business started on the right foot.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. The processes is so important. If you mention them on paper, your plan's going to change. But if you have something in mind, you stick to it, you experiment, you fail, you succeed. But having that process in your frame of and proper scheme of things is so important. Right? And team as well, like you mentioned. But yeah, if it sounds too much for you guys, you can contact Bradley for that. He's your guy. Right. And then, Bradley, having been part of acquisition process multiple times yourself, what advice would you give to agency owners who are considering selling their businesses? And how can they navigate negotiations effectively and also transition on both clients and on internal side as well?
So the first agency that I ever sold, I was not ready. I did not start the business with the expectation to sell it. And we were not running the business in the first few years as if we were going to sell in the future. And a track record of revenue and profitability is very important when it comes to exiting a business, because that's how they're going to value the business. It's how they're going to determine how much you're going to make off of that sale. And a lot of founders will say you can always pro forma what your revenue or profitability would have been had certain things that have certain decisions that you made not happened. And while many acquirers will take into consideration those decisions and those pro forma numbers, having real profit on paper, like legitimately for year over year, many years leading up to a sale is really important. So I always tell everyone that we coach, that we help, have an exit in mind, plan from day one from a financial standpoint on to get to what your goal is. So run it like a business that you plan on selling. Even if you plan on never selling it, I encourage everyone to run a business, you're going to sell it. It's going to make you run it in the right way. You're going to run it leaner. You're not going to waste money on discretionary spending that isn't adding value. You're going to invest in people because people is a huge part of evaluation at the end of the a business's life cycle. Having a good team in place is going to increase your valuation. So you're going to spend money in areas that's going to help the business grow and it's going to help the transaction value. And thinking about running it from a fiscal standpoint with the end in mind, I think is really important. And then I would go back to the earlier question, team. Having the right team in place is really important. When most founders exit, they leave the company within the first 3 years, if not immediately. Depends on what kind of transaction that you're doing, but in many cases, there's either a desire for the founder to leave immediately, especially in the case of a lot of private equity. They want to install their own leadership team. And the founder typically may be out the door immediately, maybe within the first year. Certain companies, especially if you're being acquired by a strategic, is going to want to keep you on for some period of time through an earnout. So you may have a 1, a 2, or a 3-year earnout where the founder is staying on. But at the end of the day, founders leave and executive leadership leaves, right? Your top leaders will leave if they don't see the opportunity to continue to growth. They don't see the opportunity to have a significant financial windfall. And those things are sometimes challenges after a sale. And so it's really important to make sure that you have a team in place, that there is a plan for when you leave for the next person to step up and take over more responsibility. And quite honestly, that creates a waterfall for everyone. A founder leaves, everyone gets to move up a step, right? It keeps them engaged in the business. In many cases, give them the opportunity to earn more as they move into more senior roles. So having a team that's in place that's going to take over and make it seamless is going to add value during a transaction. Any company doing their diligence is going to want to look at, is there a succession plan in place that's going to make sure that my investment isn't disrupted as a founder decides to exit. And then I think being customer centric, and every business is different. The importance of customer engagement probably varies a little bit by category. I know in my space, especially in the agency and firm kind of models, client-centric engagement is critically important, right? It's what keeps clients sticky. It's what keeps them coming back, investing, spending more, and it's what keeps them there during a transition. Companies who don't have strong client relationships, they go through tremendous churn during a transaction, right? Because it creates disruption. There's always bumps along the way during the sale of a business. And no matter how strong the leadership team is, you're taking your eye off running the business on a day-to-day standpoint to keep an eye on the transaction. And that takes a ton of time. And if you don't have great customer engagement, if you don't have strong client relationships, then you will likely lose more clients than you expect during a transaction. And that creates challenges. It creates challenges for leadership who have an earnout. It creates challenges for the acquirers. They are going to look into your customer relationships as part of any final diligence. When they talk to those customers, they want to hear great things. They want to hear loyalty keywords. And if they're not hearing that, it's going to affect your valuation for sure.
Lovely, lovely. And then you yourself, Bradley, transitioned from consumer brands to B2B marketing, and then which is a significant shift in itself, right? So what were the key lessons that you learned during the transition, during this process? And then how did you adjust your approach? Because B2B marketing is so much of result driven. The nature is such. So how was the transition for you?
While it's different, it's not as different as I thought going into that transition. Most of my agency career, in fact, all of my agency career was spent working on consumer brands and working on large consumer brands, doing traditional digital marketing and traditional advertising. And we always focused on the consumer and the consumer segments and customizing content for those consumer segments. When I moved into roles where I was having to oversee B2B marketing solutions in the last few years, what I've learned is that a lot of the principles that you find in consumer marketing are very similar, if not identical, to those found in B2B marketing. The terminology changes a little bit. The reliance on data increases as you get into the B2B side. But in general, the way campaigns work, the way you develop strategy and measure the results are relatively similar, especially as performance marketing has become so important on the consumer marketing side. You've seen more B2B and consumer kind of work look more similar. But there are some things that are different. I think the first thing that I learned is that when you're thinking about developing those campaigns for the first time is you've got to understand the difference between an audience and a consumer segment, and their decision making for in the B2B space is much more thoughtful. It takes they have more specific pain points in the B2B side than you would see in the consumer side, and they want to see those very specific pain points addressed. And so it's really critical that you're identifying those pain points and that you're trying to figure out how do you communicate those on a consistent and effective basis. As a result of that, as a result of so many different and specific pain points in the B2B space, thinking about how to educate consumer or B2B customers is really important. How do you get the right information to them? And then how do you customize or how do you personalize that message? When on the consumer side, we talk a lot about customization of marketing, whereas in B2B, it's really about personalization. How do I know what you as an individual may need or want? And how do I make sure I communicate that to you effectively and efficiently as possible? And so figuring out how you can get to that personalization is much more important than on the consumer side. Now, granted, your target's different. In a consumer marketing campaign, you're reaching hundreds of thousands, if not millions or tens of millions of consumers. Where on the B2B side, you may be targeting hundreds of consumers, maybe or customers, maybe thousands at best. So personalizing it is much more reasonable in the B2B side than on the consumer side. And then I also find, and this is always gets overlooked, I think, by first time marketers that move into the B2B business, which is sales alignment, right? You have to make sure that your strategy is aligned with what sales is doing. When you think about consumer marketing, sales and marketing work very independently of one another. Sales goes and figures out where is my item going to be sold, and they work with the retailers to make sure that product is available in the places that they think is important. And then marketing decides, okay, how am I going to drive people to those locations? How am I going to make sure that they know where to buy it and that they want to buy it? But it's really much more about the story that you're telling and getting them to the right location. Whereas I think, and so sales doesn't define the who, they have defined the where when it comes to consumer.
Yeah.
On the B2B side, sales defines the who, and you as a marketer define the where, right? You've got to figure out
Right.
where and how do I engage them? But sales has decided who they are. And so that's like really, I think that's where the biggest difference is, because if you're not aligned with the sales organization, you're probably marketing the wrong people and you're becoming very inefficient because they're targeting from an outbound standpoint, probably they're targeting one group and you may be targeting a completely different group, and you're not gaining that efficiency and effectiveness that you would want to see in a campaign. And then you've got your whole held to more accounts in the B2B marketing side. ROI focus is really important. Everything is measured when you get to B2B. It is really about, did that investment lead to tangible dollars? Whereas consumer marketing, they measure a lot more of the warm and fuzzies, I like to call them. How did you change the hearts and minds of a consumer? And that's still very important on the consumer side when they're trying to build a brand, they're trying to generate recall, they're trying to do a lot of things that are building a potential pool of people to buy, and they care less about tying that into the actual sale. And it's not that they don't care,
Yeah.
it's that it's hard to measure. So it isn't measured as effectively or as often as you would see on the B2B side. Any B2B marketer that's been doing this for a while is going to want to see every single dollar track back to the revenue generated.
Absolutely, absolutely. Lovely. And then before I let you go, Bradley, I would love to understand your take on AI. Any conversation these days cannot really get over without talking about AI. What is your take? The industry has been taken up by storm last November, December, around this time of the year 2022. So many changes, shifts, but yeah, exciting times ahead for sure. How have you adopted it? What is your take? Where are we headed as per Bradley?
So let's assume for a second that AI doesn't take over the world and that we're not answering to robots in the next couple of years, which I hope
True.
isn't the case. But I think if just in the last year, the integration of AI, especially generative AI, into the day-to-day business world has been just transformational. I've never seen anything adopted this quickly. And I see it in the way that we run our business, but also the way all of our clients are running their business, especially on the sales and marketing side. What is almost universally happening for virtually any company right now is the adoption of GPT tools to create more efficiency and a little bit more effectiveness within their existing labor pool, right? So marketing teams tapping into OpenAI, ChatGPT, or maybe Freedom GPT. A lot of people talking about Freedom GPT lately. Bard now really starting to become more popular. But tap into these tools and use it to create content, whether that's content that's consumer or customer facing, for their website or for email marketing purposes or whatever, or just for their internal communications. And like the amount of people that are now using ChatGPT or one of their competitors to formulate internal emails to advocate for whatever their point of view is more effectively internally has been where the biggest adoption has been from what we've seen. I mean, the same thing goes for the sales side, right? Is having sales has always been sales teams usually are notorious for either being usually being way too long-winded in their communication, right? They want to sell everything. It's one of the things that we see so often is you're just cramming every feature into an email or into a sell sheet that you're going to send to a customer. And I've seen a clarity of communication happen within organizations who have embraced one of these GPT platforms, right? Because it allows you to simplify very easily, even for people who are not great writers, right? They can use now GPT to be more succinct, more clear what they're communicating, and more customized. You talk or more personalized. You mentioned earlier the importance of personalization in B2B marketing. Sales is it's even more important to be personalized. And if you put a salesperson who's not a great writer and you ask them now personalize the message, you're going to get something way too long-winded and not fun to read. Now put like a GPT product on top of that. Okay, let's take what about them, the personalization that you want to communicate, the features that you think are important, and let's synthesize those into something more powerful and impactful. And that's what you're seeing pretty significantly in today's organizations. And we have clients that we work with where we've literally looked at the communication coming from two individuals, one who is younger and has embraced GPT earlier, and one who hadn't. And the clarity of thoughts from the one using GPT was so much stronger and seemed to
Mm,
understand the product so much better in a short period of time. And so it helps us taking that feedback back to the organization helps demonstrate the importance and value of embracing AI tools within the business because most people don't want to use it because they're worried they're going to lose their job. The big fear
yeah,
is I'm going to be out of a job. AI is going to replace us all. And the fact is, there is no AI out there today that's going to replace humans.
true.
It will augment them. It'll make them more effective, more efficient. Could it replace future hires because of increased efficiency? Sure, absolutely. It's possible that that teams will be able to run leaner as more of the organization embraces some of these AI, ML, and automation tools more broadly. But it's just not there yet. I have yet to see an organization who has done away with roles because of the integration of AI, at least within sales and marketing. Now, there's definitely certain roles that AI and automation will impact more. But right now, marketing and sales, for the most part, I think they've only benefited from it. They haven't that you haven't really seen any any negative drawbacks in terms of labor pool shrinking.
Absolutely. It is not a finished product as yet. You still need to humanize it at the end of the output, whatever you get from the AI platforms, right? So great, yeah. Brilliant, Bradley. It has been a lovely conversation, and I'm sure our audiences would have benefited out of what they heard in terms of the insights, your journey so far. So thank you so much for doing this with us, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's great to meet you.